Summer's here and school's out. For most folk. But for some, summer means going down to LA and enjoying even more League of Legends. I'm RandomMinionCaster and welcome to Random's Rundown, where this week we'll be looking at the second week of the 2022 Proving Grounds Summer Number 1 group stages. Before we dive into the details of this week, it is very important to note that this week will also see the CLOL, or College League of Legends Championships 2022, happening in person at the LCS studios down in LA. While CLOL and Proving Grounds aren't directly related, there is a lot of overlap and quite a few players will be participating in both events. As such, we want to acknowledge the following individuals who are powering through this unique situation and wish them the best of luck for both CLOL and Proving Grounds. This week saw 4 teams secure their playoff spots, another 4 teams were eliminated, and 8 teams are still facing a do or die situation next week for the final 4 spots. Starting in Group A, 100 Thieves Knicks saw their first loss of this tournament in a narrow win over their seeming kryptonite, Maryville University. As to Maryville, despite or maybe because of their preparations for CLOL, they've looked stronger than ever with some of the best early game strategies we've seen yet. Specifically, Azog and Shady down in the bot lane had standout performances with the entire team backing them up. I'd like to particularly note Niles, who was moving from the top lane down to the bot lane frequently in order to facilitate the advantage. Unfortunately for them, there's a reason why 100 Thieves Knicks are considered the final boss, and we saw precisely why, as in Game 2, they were down over 9,000 gold, but they managed to pull an amazing comeback with Jinx and Lulu for Lens, and their substitute support, their coach missed coming in to play for support for them. And Game 3, that was just a pure mechanical feast for the eyes, with Sniper getting his signature Riven in the top lane and Dark Wings having an amazing performance on the Akali in the mid lane there, both of them pulling off an amazing 2v5 situation in the bot side. To probably no one's surprise there, 100 Thieves Knicks will be the Group A first seeds for playoffs, while Maryville aren't out of it just yet. They still have another shot to get that second seed and the playoff berth. In the lower bracket, a heart-rending duel between amateur fan favorites DK Crew and Cincinnati Fear, yet another 3-game series that went the full distance. DK Crew had some interesting strategies with a Singe support and a lesser seen Kalista pick, not in the same game, which saw mixed success, some good individual plays, but not quite enough to tide them over. As for Cincinnati Fear, well, Fear seemingly springs eternal here as Dragoon once again in the top lane refused to die, and we saw Dragoon smash yet again. Game 1, his Gwen was an absolute monster and cut short DK Crew's hopes, and in Game 3, well, Dragoon and Darius seems to be a match made in amateur, which just keeps coming back up again. Every time he gets his hands on that champion, he shows his utter mastery at it. Trickster also had an amazing Game 3. A little bit of a muted first 2 games, but in Game 3, his Viego showed how to play the enemy's champions to excellent effect, breaking both heads and ankles in equal measures. Cincinnati Fear didn't get a rap made for them, but I think the dub will suit them just fine. And for DK Crew, Banana Slammer, what a wonderful phrase. Banana Slammer, sadly, here we part ways. Group B had much clearer cut games, starting with Jake's Kittens facing off against AoE Ginger Turmeric. Potential spoiler, this was not a good week for the food friends in PGCQ. While AoE Ginger Turmeric continued to showcase strong individual play for their strong players, along with now expected solid if slightly unorthodox drafts, it just wasn't enough to stand up to Jake's Kittens. While Jake Kittens has always had strong players and that's been one of their signature points, This week was really about their cooperation. Aaron in the jungle continued to make a very strong case for why he's the hottest jungle prospect this split. But he was very much enabled by the rest of his team, especially on the bottom half of the map by Ryoma, Scooped, and Prismo. They were incredibly responsive, enabling Aaron to get all sorts of objectives, invades, and priority all over the place. As to the top lane, Porsche was often left alone and had to sacrifice a little bit for the rest of the team, but he was willing to do that, and despite sacrificing CS and pressure, had huge impact come mid to late game as well. If Jake Skittins can continue this level of play, I can very easily see them making an incredibly deep run, perhaps all the way to the finals here in the playoffs. Meanwhile, in the lower bracket, Team Fish Tacos were simply insufficient to satisfy Third Party. Third Party had a notable substitution in the top lane with a brand new face Traffy coming in to cover for top lane mainstay Dinka. On paper, this did raise some questions, but as we saw on the Rift, Third Party did not miss a beat, as both Munchie and Just were omnipresent on the map, rolling everywhere constantly, never giving Team Fish Tacos any opportunity to really capitalize on that top lane. That's it, Team Fish Taco did incredibly well in the top lane on their own. Alorum, as ever, was a beast. Just wasn't quite enough to pull off the win there, unfortunately. Now, with a combined 0, 2, and 25 KDA, I think Just was the MVP of this particular series there. Incredibly high kill participation, and his Rakan is starting to look like a must ban, as not only did he help win lane, but he helped win the entire game in other lanes as well in the process. A respectable run for Team Fish Taco. Unfortunately, the blazing hot summer just isn't the best season for Fish Tacos. As for Third Party, they will now have to face off against the more potent AoE Ginger Turmeric for the second Group B playoff spot. The scramble in Group C has only further intensified as the clear favorites AoE Esports have managed to distinguish themselves from the rest of the group. They did so against Team Pending, who, while they might look like they're trolling with their picks at times, they were simply no match for the troll king of amateur himself, Winnie, formerly known as Winston. Now, not only were AoE down to scrap with Team Pending, but they were willing to play a little fast and loose in draft as well, whipping out the first support Ashe of PGCQ for Skytech, Ziggs to round that out with Lynx there. And it was a very potent combination which wasn't punished at all in lane, very safe, and helped set up a lot of plays down the road in the mid to late game there. As mentioned before, Winnie also had 2 amazing games on Trundle, declaring all of Team Pending's jungle as his domain and unceasingly harassing Kitsuo. Just an overall strong performance from every player on AoE Esports to show why this amateur organization has quickly become a mainstay of the scene and why they've made every playoff so far here in 2022. In the lower bracket, one step away from death, 300 took their final stand against CLG Faith, but unlike the movies, they failed to hold the pass. CLG Faith was always going to be a slow burn. They were built to be a developmental team that would scale up throughout the PGCQ tournaments, maybe not even in this first one of summer here. But some parts seem to be coming online a lot quicker than others, and this series was quite simply the Town show. Town had already shown off an incredible Akali performance last week, and he somehow got his hands on it again in Game 1, going deathless in that game here. But Game 2 on Victor, I think, was a bigger statement game. Going a combined 19 kills and only 2 deaths throughout this series, Town needs to be targeted for teams running up against CLG Faith. And for the CLG Faithful, they're starting to be rewarded, though the bigger question still remains pending next week. Can they make the playoffs? Perhaps on another day, 300 might have been able to pull off their win. When we think back to last week when they played AoE Esports, they looked full of vim and vigor. But against CLG Faith, they looked a little lackluster and just could not make the cut this week. Group D started with a banger in the upper half of the bracket, with a bittersweet reunion for the 2021 TSM Amateur squad comprised of Eclipse, Doxa, Gorka, and Dombre. They fought tooth and claw in this series to try and get that first playoff spot. right away in Game 1, Dombre, as Senna managed to steal away not just one, but two objectives, a Herald and a more critical Dragon Soul away from Taco Gaming. And while Taco Gaming dominated the early parts of the game, they struggled to close out, and eventually they got the win, but it came from Eclipse, backdooring not once, but twice to be able to secure that. And while that was happening, Taco Gaming was losing a fight mid, so really could have swung either way. Unfortunately, things just went downhill for Taco Gaming from there, as EGP out Taco. Taco Gaming, known for their scaling drafts here, found themselves outscaled and losing a lot of the late game, and EG Prodigies finally showing a different playstyle, a more scaling oriented playstyle here. Huge props to both Faisal and Mia in the side lanes as they respectively carried Game 2 and Game 3, both showcasing their mechanical prowess and why EG calls this team Prodigies. Living up to all the hype here, EGP reaffirms the view that they are top 4 in this tournament. As for Taco Gaming, it appears that rumors of the Taco Tuesday buff might have been somewhat exaggerated. In the lower bracket, things were not quite as clutch. Supernova have further polished themselves, continuing their early game supremacy and improving on their mid-game closeout. AoE Randoms unfortunately lived up to their name somewhat, as they looked kind of disconnected in their plays. In their defense, Cyber was apparently playing from the LCS studio without a headset and had limited means of communication with his team, and unfortunately it showed in their play. While they did find individual picks and skirmishes, they were, well, random to say the least, and it felt like they couldn't quite capitalize on those individual kills. Supernova, on the other hand, moved with great purpose, and while Actor continued to steal the show, Tomato almost managed to upstage him with his killer instincts on Kaisa. Now, as Supernova has said, "If I were a fruit, what fruit would I be? I would be a blossoming tomato from Supernova, ripe and crisp with flavor. A tomato with plays so fast and swift that any ADC play reveals the splendor hidden behind him. I would be Tomato." Of course, there's still the question of, how does Tomato fare against a Taco in a rematch? We'll have to find out next week. But as of now, we have our first 4 playoff teams confirmed: 100 Thieves next, Jake Skittins, AoE Esports, and Evil Geniuses Prodigies. Commiserations and best wishes to the fallen here: DK Crew, Team Fish Taco, Team 300, and AoE Randoms. And of course, good luck to the 8 remaining teams who have one more series for gloom or for glory this Monday at 3 p.m. Pacific on the Academy and Path to LCS channels. For now, this has been Random, and that's been the rundown. I'll see you all on the Rift.